It's been a weird product release cycle. Normally, when a brand new MacBook Pro 13 comes out, it's all that I want to talk about because as you well know, I've always considered the 13-inch Pro model to be the best option when it comes to getting into the Mac ecosystem. They normally are the best way to get a good balance of price to performance, and while the sticker price is on the higher side of the quote-unquote entry-level laptop, I've never thought that they were overpriced. Obviously though, as you see the last videos that I've made, the new M1 MacBook Air and the Mac Mini, they've kind of upset that apple cart, get it, apple cart? And honestly, they've changed their respective product lines way more than the M1 MacBook Pro 13 did. But it's still out there, it's still a great computer, and it's probably the most prudent, safest bet when it comes to the new Macs, and I've still been using it for the past month. So how is it holding up? Let's find out. I learned this one's not controlling the camera. What's up everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So the last video we did was the MacBook Air's time to shine in the 1 month later impressions follow-up, and a lot of what I said in that video is still applicable in this video. So today, I will do my best to focus strictly on the MacBook Pro 13 and try not to repeat that other video too much. However, there will probably be some overlap as the two computers are very similar. I mean, they're running basically the exact same hardware underneath. And speaking of hardware, let's quickly start off with the tech specs and pricing information if you've never seen one of these computers. If you didn't watch my original follow-up video, which you can check out after this one. This newest model of the MacBook Pro 13 comes in at a base model price of $1,299. And for that money, you get the full M1 experience, much like you do on the Mac Mini. You'll get the 8-core CPU, the 8-core GPU, and the 16-core neural engine. Unlike the MacBook Air, there is no locked GPU core on the base model. Plus, you'll get 8 gigabytes of unified memory and 256 gigabytes of storage. It's hard to say 56 and gigabytes. 56 gigabytes. Blah. Try saying that 5 times fast. There isn't much in the way of upgradability here, but you can add up to 8 gigabytes more of unified memory and up to a 2 terabyte solid state drive. My personal model that I purchased at release is the 16 gigabytes unified memory and 1 terabyte solid state drive option, which I think if you're looking at buying the MacBook Pro 13, it's probably the best overall package to get. And because I know the question will come up in the comments, it continues to be my belief if there is an Apple tax, it's right here in the storage options. I would say get as much unified memory as you can afford, and if you need to save some money and you can't get the bigger internal drives, just buy a faster external solid state drive because it will cost you less. Apple's internal storage options, they're not cheap, and they will basically give you the same performance as an external solid state drive. And that's the magic of Thunderbolt 3. It's so darn fast that it might technically be slower than your PCIe internal storage device, but will you ever actually notice in use? Probably not. Please do not ask. I know that's just opening me up for everybody to ask. I can't, 8 versus 16 is a nightmare of mine now. So let's get to my refined thoughts. As this is an X time later video, I'll try to keep this to any big refinements or things that have changed since we last looked at this technology. And the biggest thought that I have about the MacBook Pro 13 after a month is it's just a solid computer. It's not flashy, it's not the shiniest or the most mind-blowing of the initial 3 M1 computers. It's just solid. I already really like the 13-inch Intel version from 2020, and even the i5 configuration that I still own, I'm looking at it right now, that's still a great computer. It's hard to judge refinements in technology because for power, I was good 5 years ago with my 2015 MacBook Pro. To this day, my wife still uses that for her master's degree, and it flawlessly runs her meetings, word processing, researching, web conferencing, everything. That old computer does great, and she does not want me to upgrade it because for her, it is the better option because of all the ports built into it, which are probably way more than we'll ever see again. That rant about the 2015 version is really to center you on what Gary here really cares about. Power, sure, it's great. Makes an awesome thumbnail title when you're like, it's the most powerful thing ever. But everything in technology, from cameras to computers to cell phones, they're all powerful enough to do everything a daily user could need today and for a few years in the future. Like Moore's Law is not as intense today as it was a couple of years ago. I care more about usability and quality of life improvements like I/O, port versatility, etc. I don't care all that much about the actual power on hand unless it contributes to one of those quality of life updates. And we've been circling around the point, but we're coming back to it right now. Where we get back to the M1 MacBook Pro is all of the major updates from the Intel MacBook Pro 13, which we should still make a comparison on. Leave me a comment below if you still want to see me compare the M1 MacBook Pro 13 and the Intel MacBook Pro 13. Let me know. I've been debating on whether to actually make that video or not since it's been about a month. All of those major updates to the M1 for me are to the usability. Might not be overt usability, but it's all quality of life from here on out. First up in the major quality of life update is the battery life. It's crazier here than even on the craziness that is the MacBook Air. I know we talked about this last time, but it's so striking, I'm reiterating it here. This battery just keeps going and going. Yes, if you're old enough to remember the Energizer Bunny, like the bunny that, just kept on going, this MacBook is a lot like what that bunny promised. 20 hours of battery life changes how you can use a laptop. The most obvious thing is the longer the battery lasts, the less time you actually need to be next to a wall, or you need to bring along less batteries. 20 hours is crazy. Let's say you only use it 8 hours fully a day. That's still over 2 workdays of battery life on the computer. And since I did the math, no big deal, I had a calculator. It's 2.5 to be exact. This is the ultimate usability upgrade. You never need to worry about keeping this computer charged. You never even really have to bring a charging cable to work or throw one of those external batteries in your backpack. I know I go on about this. I know I go on about the battery life, but it's really freeing to think of. And yes, we're kind of getting into hyperbolic, touchy-feely realms that technical people don't really like, but I prefer when you don't have to think about using your gear and it just works. And needing to worry about your battery life, that definitely takes brain power. You don't have to worry about that here. It's just nice. And that was the quality of life benefit number 1, leading into the second quality of life benefit. With all of that great battery life I just talked about, each minute of it, you get the full power of the MacBook. It's not limited in any way when you leave the comfort, or, if we're being honest, what feels like a cage sometimes, of your home office, or actual office if you still go to one of those. And as much as I like Windows laptops, and I do, there are some fantastic options out there too, this is the part where Apple wins out. I'll get the full M1 experience whether or not the MacBook Pro 13 is plugged into the wall, or if I'm just carrying it with me wherever I go. Getting the full experience and power for 20 hours, we're basically in uncharted territory, which will change what you can do remote computing wise from now on. Somebody out there with a much better imagination than I do will be able to figure out a way to make this work in just some fantastic ways. You tell me, I'm asking you, what other computer in the market that is this small and costs this amount of money can give you this level of performance for this long without any external support? I'm not trying to be confrontational here. I'm not being like, hey, you tell me, Mr. Smart Guy. I'm legitimately asking. I would love to find some other hidden gem of a laptop system out there that I could also buy and try out. Look, I'm glad that this exists. I would also like to find out something else. So if there's something else out there, let me know. Bringing me to quality of life improvement number 3, which, okay, number 3 is a mix of a bunch of things. Well, the last 2 were pretty related. These last 3 are kind of all the same thing. Thermal performance / noise performance / power. Over the last month, the M1 MacBook Pro is easily the best thermally managed laptop I've ever seen. Sure, the M1 MacBook Air is great, and I haven't had a problem with it thermally, but it doesn't have an active cooling system. So theoretically, there could be a series of workflows that could cause it to overheat before the internal heat could dissipate. I do not doubt that that could happen. But there's no such issue here because there is that same passive cooling as in the MacBook Air, but also active cooling to push the heat away. It pushes all that heat, think of the heat as bad feelings and bad vibes, and just pushes them away. It's the most positive of all the MacBooks. I barely use that active cooling system. In the last month, I've moved between this, the MacBook Air, and the Mac Mini as my primary work computer. Like right now, I wrote this script on the MacBook Pro 13. And whether I'm crushing my unified memory chatting on Twitter, plugged into an external monitor, which used to really upset my MacBook Pro 16, something fierce, let me tell you, editing video, editing photo, playing some video games, I still haven't heard the fan. Which is both a good and a great sign that yes, the M1 produces very little heat, but if there were something that really cranked on the processor, the active cooling has plenty of gap and plenty of headroom to not need to spin up at all. And did you hear that there was no problem when plugged into an external monitor? The Intel-based MacBooks really like to turn on the fans when exporting video to an external monitor because it's something to do with the GPU. It wasn't a deal breaker, but it was kind of annoying that you'd plug it into a monitor and not doing anything else. It's just plugged into a monitor, and all of a sudden you'd hear the that's my fan impression. No fan issues here. That also leads directly into power a little bit because while no, numbers going up doesn't exactly matter to me, leading to back what we said in the beginning of the video. However, having power that works with all these other updates, quietness, battery life, thermal performance, that's where I care about power updates because that is a usable power update. And the power on hand here is exactly what you would expect if you've seen any of my other M1 videos. This has seamlessly replaced my more than doubly expensive MacBook Pro 16. I get basically the same performance, better in certain high efficiency video file regards, but I won't solely focus on video editing today. I get that for less than half of the price and half of the size. For daily productivity tasks like typing, creating spreadsheets, etc., you won't be able to tell that much of a difference between the two systems. Other than that, because of the way the ARM architecture works, the apps will open and respond lightning fast, especially if they have already transitioned to Apple Silicon. If not, they'll still do pretty well, but not as well, not like mind-blowingly well. And that leads us to quality of life update number 4. And for me, this is actually the most important one. Stability. Yes, this is one of those bleed over things from previous videos. In the past month, I haven't had a single crash, a single hiccup, or a single problem with this MacBook Pro 13. That's amazing. That's amazing. The thing that I need most in my technology, I need reliability above all else. I literally, if you look at my schedule, I do not have the time for stuff that crashes or causes friction in either my day job's rhythm or in my YouTube hobbies rhythm. I do not have time for stuff that doesn't work. There is a reason. There's a reason that I ditched Mac as my primary computer for about 4 months this year. Those Macs were adding more time in every of my workflows than it was worth to keep going. Now, I've always been and continue to be a hybrid Windows/Mac user, and that skewed very heavily Windows earlier in 2020 because Catalina was not viable to me, which actually had me pretty concerned for Big Sur because if their current system was having problems, how could they have better reliability on a new operating system on a new hardware system? Looked like the Macs were on some shaky ground, but thankfully the Apple engineering team figured it out. This is the most stable I think I've ever seen Mac OS. And that Mac Windows pendulum, swings all the time. It's currently swinging in the Mac direction right now. Look, legit. When time costs so much money, I'll switch to whatever works. I don't care about the name brand and I don't care about what the YouTube channel talks about. I will use whatever works because I do not have it costs me too much money to waste my time. Okay, let's briefly cover some other things. We already talked about the keyboard on this computer. It continues to be one of the best in the market. I do prefer the MacBook Air with its physical function keys, but I can accept that some might like the touch bar better. The display continues to be beautiful, if slightly dated in appearance, and it can go 100 nits brighter than the MacBook Air to reach 500 nits. So if you do travel or go around mixed lighting, this could be the better option. Speakers are still crisp, and the best things this side of the MacBook Pro 16, which even though it is loud when plugged into an external monitor, still has the best speakers on a laptop, period. And the thing that just hurts me right here, it still only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. Unfortunately, in the past month, 2 more of these did not magically appear on my MacBook Pro 13. We could use a little more magic in this household. If that darn elf on a shelf wanted to be useful in my house, they could have magicked 2 more USB-C ports onto this computer. Squiggly. But at the end of the day, so what, right? 1 month later, and what do we really have to show for it? I think the MacBook Pro 13, while not as flashy, and it hasn't had as big of a performance jump as its sibling Air and Mini options, this is probably the best of both worlds. It's almost the same size as the MacBook Air, but it also has the full functionality of the base model and the active cooling of the Mac Mini. It has the best battery life, the best power, and the best screen of the current M1 MacBook options. It's just a real safe bet. And if I were recommending somebody looking for a MacBook, if your budget is the #1 priority, I would recommend the MacBook Air. It's phenomenal for the price. If reliability and consistency are your #1 priority, I would easily recommend the MacBook Pro 13. Again, it's just a really good blend of the M1 line. It continues to be a great option that I've really enjoyed using and will continue to use this as a big part of my computing environment. And And if you liked this video and are considering this laptop, good for you. I do have a video specifically showing all of my favorite accessories for the MacBook Pro 13. Hooray! And you can find that by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.